Hit that subscribe button. True Talk Lounge. Okay, I got a short clip from Black to Africa. Black to Africa. If you want to follow him, you can. Educational brother. But he really found a lady who's talking about racism and how it dominates America and the world. Check it out. If you don't believe me, it's to blow your mind.
What's up, family? This is your man, not your boy, bringing you another Go Nugget that you can either pick up or you can just kick it aside. I just want to share this video to many of you all. Welcome to my channel, getting a little education outside of the mainstream media. But this woman who has done a great job educating our white people here in America in the racism that may not be actually, known to them in the way they perform or the way that they see things. 3 points that she points out that I want to give to you all, and please for you to look out for it in the video, is the one that is how this country of America is ran by predominantly white folks who happen to be predominantly men who typically, by their own biases of growing up, do not have so-called the concern for others that do not look like them. The other is the image that are portrayed, whether it's on TV, whether it is on magazines, movies, what have you, that are controlled by white people and other media platforms that do not have the interest for those who just don't have the same background as themselves. And lastly is the fact that living in a society that we as a black people are the minority has a bad hand dealt to us, where she confessed that we're getting the raw deal and that the other people or race of people in America has it better than we do. Check out the video and hopefully that you can learn a thing or two about what she's saying.
This is the House Freedom Caucus. This is arguably the most powerful committee in the nation. Talk about making decisions at the table that will affect the lives of people who are not at that table. They're literally discussing the health care bill when this picture was taken. I can't find a better visual representation of the embodiment of institutional power. They are making decisions, right, that affect millions and millions and millions of people, all right? So can you see that this is a good representation of what it means to say institutional power? You know, that whatever, even if they were the nicest people in the world, by virtue of that homogeneity, they're going to embed implicit bias in the policies and practices, right? Because they simply don't even know other people's realities or needs. Okay. So if you walked into the room, would it be almost visceral to you? Can you also see that these men, I mean, by every axis, they're cis, white men, they're probably multimillionaires, they probably went to the finest schools, and their entire lives they've been groomed to be sitting at that table and have always seen themselves as the smartest people in any room. Okay, you all clear, aren't you, that people who grow up poor don't end up at that table? When I saw this picture, I just said, this is what it means to be white. These are his incoming interns. These are our future politicians. These are the people who will sit at the tables making decisions about the lives of those who are not at the table and who they have not been taught are valuable to know or consider or understand. I want you to imagine the neighborhoods they likely grew up in, right? The schools they likely went to, the teachers they likely had, the friendship circles, their wedding albums. And now imagine that these are our future medical researchers. These are our future school teachers. These are our future social workers, right? Our future lawyers, etc. Right? And this is the position from which white people claim we're objective on race. Now, just get that image back in your mind of that history slide, and then just look at this. This is last year's College Champion Jeopardy playoffs. So those are our best and our brightest, soon to be certified as highly educated from our institutions of higher learning. And that's the board at the end of the Grand Champion round. So as we can see, there was one category, not one of them touched. Clearly the most difficult. Nobody was going to risk losing the Grand Championship. You know, it's just one picture. I think it speaks volumes. And I don't feel that I can do justice to what it means that we don't know our history. That we could ever separate it out and see it as their history, not the history of this country. Because when we don't know our history and we cannot trace it into the present, we are left with deeply problematic explanations for current conditions. All right, so legal authority and institutional control is what transforms people's prejudice into a far-reaching system. So let's look at race in 2019, right? So the presidency and vice presidency, 100% white. The US Senate, 91% white. I just have to point out again, the most diverse Congress we've ever had. The House of Representatives, 73% white. The current cabinet, 89% white. The governors, 98% white. Mayors, 88% white. Military advisors, just think about who we go to war with. 100% white. Federal judges, 88% white. Police officers, 80% white. The people who decide which TV shows we see, 93% white. The people who decide which books we read, 90% white. People who decide which news is covered, 85% white. People who decide which music is produced, 95% white. School teachers, 82% white. Full-time college professors, 84% white. Owners of men's pro football teams, 97% white. Owners of men's pro basketball teams, 98% white. The players, 75% black. Right? And yet, what is the definition of a racist, of what it means to be racist in the mainstream? Right? Well, it's an individual, always an individual, not a system, who consciously does not like people based on race. Apparently, if it's not conscious, it doesn't count. And is intentionally mean to them. It also has to be intentional to count. Individual, conscious, malintent across race. That is a racist. And I don't know that you could come up with a better definition to protect the system of racism than this one. Because this definition makes it virtually impossible to talk to the average white person about the inevitable absorption of a racist worldview that we get from living in a culture in which it is infused and embedded across all its institutions, right? I think that this definition is the root of virtually all white defensiveness on this topic. Have you guys noticed any white defensiveness on this topic? Because if that's my definition of a racist, and you've just suggested I've said or done something racist, much less that I benefit from racist just by being white, what I'm going to hear is you just question my very moral character. And now I need to defend my moral character, right? And I will, right? So racism is a system, not an event. It certainly occurs in specific moments that we can identify, but of course it's 365, 24/7. It's the system we're in. And part of being raised as a white person in this society has been to be raised to be what I think of as functionally illiterate on this topic. But when you back one group's collective racial bias with legal authority and institutional control, it is transformed into a far-reaching system that becomes the default. It becomes automatic. It's not dependent on your friendliness or your good intentions. I want to just give you one glance at the trajectory of anti-blackness since the beginning of this country to the current time to illustrate those points. And this slide will be deliberately dense, and we can think about it as state-sanctioned organized crime, quite frankly, against African Americans. And it begins with kidnapping and 300 plus years of enslavement, torture, rape, and brutality, and it carries on. About 1/4 of the way in here, bans on testifying against whites, and you are in my lifetime 1/4 of the way in that slide, you were in my lifetime where it was technically legal to murder black people in this country. I would love to never again hear another white person say I didn't own slaves, as if that ended on that day. And about halfway in at employment discrimination, you are now in 2019 with copious empirical evidence. Employment discrimination, educational discrimination, bias laws and policing, white flight, subprime mortgages, mass incarceration, school-to-prison pipeline, disproportionate special education referrals and punishments, testing, tracking, school funding, biased media, voter suppression, cultural mockery, historical omissions, unaddressed trauma, to name a few. It's a system. It's the system we're in, and none of us could be and none of us were exempt from its forces. And this system is not interrupted by friendliness. The system is not interrupted because I smile at black people when I pass them by or go to lunch on occasion. And African Americans are not and have never been in the position to do this to the entire white collective, and the white collective has always been and continues to be in the position to do this to African Americans. There is no such thing as reverse racism. Okay? So let me say a little bit about some of the challenges of trying to educate white people on racism. And a great example is I was recently going to give a similar talk to a large tech company, and before they would sign the contract, the legal department wanted to see my slides. And when they got to this slide, they actually asked me if I could take the word white off the slide. To which I replied, "You really should have vetted me before you called." No, I won't. If you are white, I'm sure you have an opinion on the topic, and I don't know virtually anyone in this room. And yet I am confident to say the following. If you are white and you have not devoted years of sustained study, struggle, and focus on this topic, your opinions are necessarily limited, superficial, and uninformed. Wow, how can I say that when I don't even know you? I mean, maybe you've been to Costa Rica. Maybe you have multiracial nieces and nephews. Maybe you were in Teach for America. I can say it because nothing in dominant culture gives us the information we would need to have an informed opinion on arguably the most complex, nuanced social dilemma for the last several hundred years. For example, you can get through graduate school in this country without ever discussing racism, can you not? You can get through teacher education in this country without ever discussing racism. And if you're in a progressive teacher education program, you'll have one required course, multicultural of some sort. But that doesn't mean you'll be discussing racism. You might just be talking about how to introduce ethnic authors in February. Okay? You can get through law school. You can be seen as qualified to lead anything, virtually. Right? So the first challenge for those of us who are white is humility. I want you to know that I'm not standing in front of the choir right now. Even if you volunteered to come, there is no white choir. I am not the choir. And the moment I think I'm the choir, I'm going to be complacent and arrogant and probably defensive about any suggestion that I might not be as much of the choir as I think that I am. Right? Second challenge is that if I do a good job, this won't be comfortable, particularly for the white people in the room, for the whole time. The status quo is racism, and as a white person, that's comfortable for me virtually 24/7. So I'm not here to uphold that. I want to unsettle that, because we will not get where we need to go from a place of white comfort. And the second place where we can begin to get uncomfortable is that I am going to challenge the very precious ideology of individualism. And I'm going to do it by generalizing about white people all night long. And you're going to be just fine. Okay? It is a very precious ideology. In general, I'm talking about the white collective, we don't like to be generalized about. When a white person invokes one of these narratives, when racism comes up, they're giving you their evidence, right? This is white people's evidence. In my mind, what is this my evidence of? What do I want to make sure you know? I'm not racist, right? This is not even a stretch, is it? This is what white people say to establish their lack of racism, correct? Okay, so if this is my evidence that I'm not racist, then in order to be good evidence, it has to distinguish me from a racist, right? So a racist apparently can't do those things, or else that would not be good evidence. So a racist can't work 3 cubicles down from a person of color. Couldn't have people call their family, and apparently there's living in Oakland frees the white folks from racism, right? No racists in Oakland. All right. I was in the Peace Corps. I'm going to teach for America. I'm a minority myself. I marched in the 60s. I was on a mission in Africa. I've been doing this for years. Well, this is probably popular in Oakland. We don't like how white our neighborhood is or is getting, but we had to move here for the schools. What could we do? I think it's disingenuous. I think we do like how white our neighborhoods are. And I don't think our kids could be exceptional and have the best if somebody didn't have less. I think that's a hard conversation we need to have. But these are, of course, all colors celebrate narratives. You know, I see it, I embrace it. There's a question that's never failed me in my efforts to uncover how do we get the outcomes we're getting then if this is what's going on. And that question isn't, is this true or is this false? Were you or weren't you taught to treat everyone the same? We're going to debate that. The question that's never failed me is, how do these narratives function? So white supremacy. I'm very comfortable saying the term white supremacy. Yes, it includes extremists or neo-Nazis, what we would think about. That's how I grew up with that definition. It is also a highly descriptive sociological term for the society we live in. A society in which white people are elevated as the ideal for humanity and everyone else is a deficient version of that, right? White supremacy. Niceness is not courageous. There's nothing courageous about niceness. You won't be actually seen as particularly nice if you push racism onto the table. I'm not saying don't be nice, better than, be nice. But that's not anti-racism, right? In some ways, racism depends on white people just being nice and carrying on, right? It takes strategic, intentional action and courage. And so I thank you for being here, and I would like to leave you with another image of a transformed world. Thank you.
Think about it. Think about it.